Broken skulls bearing precise puncture wounds, skeletons still bound with stone-tipped arrows embedded in vertebrae, mass graves overflowing with scalped remains. These fragments of the past tell a haunting story etched into bone and earth. Across millennia, death has trailed humanity not only in the form of beasts, but more chillingly at the hands of other humans. Yet our tale begins not as killers, but as prey. For countless generations before we rose to dominate the food chain, our ancestors lived and died in a world ruled by fangs, claws, and talons. One of the earliest and most chilling testaments to this primal vulnerability was unearthed in South Africa, the skull cap of a juvenile Paranthropus robustus labeled specimen SK54. Dating to approximately 1.5 million years ago, this fossil tells the story of a fatal encounter. According to the Australian Museum, the skull displays to round puncture wounds perfectly aligned with the lower canine teeth of a leopard. Paleoanthropologist Dr. C.K. Brain confirmed in the 1970s that the spacing and shape of the punctures matched those inflicted by modern leopards, suggesting the child was killed and dragged into a tree to be devoured, just as leopards behave today. Another fossil from the same region, the famous Tong child, reveals a different predator's legacy. This 3-year-old Australopithecus africanus, who lived roughly 2.3 million years ago, bore wounds consistent with an aerial attack. Researchers studying the skull noted punctures and depressed fractures that mirror injuries observed in monkeys killed by large birds of prey such as eagles. This discovery paints a grim picture. Our ancestors were not only stalked on the ground, but also hunted from the skies. Such threats likely shaped fundamental human behaviors, the forging of tight-knit social groups, the creation of tools, and a heightened sense of awareness, all adaptations forged in the crucible of survival. As our lineage evolved, so too did the nature of the threats we faced. By around 10,000 years ago, the most dangerous predator in the human world was, paradoxically, another human being. Along the desolate shores of ancient Lake Turkana in Kenya, archaeologists uncovered a discovery that would reshape our understanding of prehistoric violence. At a site called Nataruk, researchers from Cambridge University revealed the remains of 27 individuals, a man, women, and children, victims of a massacre. Dr. Marta Mirazan-Lar, lead author of the 2016 study published in Nature, described the brutality as unrelenting. Of the 12 relatively intact skeletons, 10 bore unmistakable signs of violent death: shattered skulls, broken ribs, snapped limbs, and sharp projectile points lodged in bone. In one particularly harrowing case, an obsidian blade remained embedded in a man's skull. For others, including a heavily pregnant woman, appeared to have had their hands tied behind their backs before being killed. Injuries were concentrated on the head, neck, chest, and limbs, suggesting a methodical and thorough attack. No burial was attempted. The bodies were left where they fell. Nataruk defied the long-held assumption that organized warfare began with sedentary agricultural societies. These were nomadic hunter-gatherers without cities, property, or farmland to protect. Yet they waged calculated, coordinated violence against others, a reflection, perhaps, of something intrinsic to the human condition. Professor Robert Foley, a co-author of the study, argued that such violence likely evolved in tandem with traits we celebrate: cooperation, altruism, and social bonding. The weapons used, a mixture of long-range projectiles and close combat tools like clubs and knives, imply foresight, preparation, and strategic execution. But why unleash such devastation? Researchers offered two theories. The first, Nataruk's location near fresh water and abundant food made it a valuable and contested resource. The second, violence may have been the default response when unfamiliar groups encountered each other. Nataruk might have been one battle in a larger, unwritten chronicle of prehistoric warfare. Earlier still, in the arid desert of northern Sudan, evidence emerged of violence not as an exception but as a recurring part of daily life. Discovered in the 1960s during rescue excavations ahead of the Aswan High Dam's construction, the 13,400-year-old cemetery of Jebel Sahaba is one of the oldest known sites of large-scale, repeated conflict. Archaeologist Fred Wendorf identified the remains of 61 individuals, men, women, and children, many of whom displayed violent injuries, crushed skulls, fractured bones, and flint projectiles lodged in or lying near their skeletons. Initially interpreted as a massacre, the site took on new meaning after a detailed 2021 study led by Isabel Kreviker. The reanalysis revealed over 100 additional injuries, some healed, some fresh. About 1/4 of the skeletons bore signs of multiple traumatic encounters, suggesting survivors of past attacks were later killed in new assaults. This wasn't a singular event, but a prolonged era of sporadic, deadly raids. Dr. Christophe Nunez, a physical anthropologist at the University of Bordeaux, emphasized the implications. Such findings challenge the belief that warfare is a modern phenomenon. These people lived at a time of dramatic climate shifts, which likely increased pressure on vital resources and fueled repeated cycles of violence. This grim pattern persisted long after Jebel Sahaba and across the globe. In present-day South Dakota, the Crow Creek site contains the chilling aftermath of one of North America's most horrific prehistoric massacres dated to around 1325 CE. Located along the Missouri River, the village belonged to the initial coalescent culture, forebears of the Arikara people. The community had built defensive ditches, a testament to the omnipresent threat of attack. In 1978, as erosion exposed bones from a defensive ditch, archaeologists uncovered the remains of at least 486 individuals, all victims of a single catastrophic onslaught. The signs of violence were gruesome and unmistakable. Many skulls had been scalped, limbs dismembered, and bodies decapitated. Men, women, and children were all among the dead, suggesting the attackers sought to exterminate an entire community. As societies became more complex, so did the nature of killing. Beyond opportunistic raids or skirmishes, we begin to see evidence of organized, ritualized executions, calculated and systematic acts of communal violence. In central Germany, the site of Halberstadt offers perhaps the earliest known example of formal execution. Dating to roughly 7,000 years ago during the early Neolithic period, this site contained a mass grave of 9 individuals, 8 young men and 1 woman. Archaeologist Christian Meyer and his colleagues noted a chilling uniformity to the wounds. Blunt force trauma focused almost entirely on the backs of the skulls. This was not the chaotic violence of a battlefield or surprise ambush. The victims were likely subdued, perhaps kneeling or restrained, and then methodically killed one by one. Their bodies were discarded haphazardly in a pit, starkly contrasting with the orderly, respectful burials typical of the era. Isotope analysis revealed the victims were outsiders, people not native to the area. Their presence suggests they were captives executed far from their homeland. The Halberstadt site thus represents the oldest clear evidence of structured executions, indicating an advanced degree of social organization and symbolic violence. These weren't murders of passion or defense, they were messages sent through death. Yet not all prehistoric deaths came in waves of group violence. Many were intimate, personal, and quietly tragic. At Shanidar Cave in modern-day Iraq, archaeologists found the skeleton of a Neanderthal male dubbed Shanidar I, who lived around 45,000 years ago. His body told a remarkable story. He had suffered a crushing head injury, likely blinding him in one eye. His right arm had been amputated above the elbow. He also endured arthritis and other debilitating conditions. Yet he survived for years, evidence that his community cared for him, protected him, and tended to his needs. His burial was deliberate, a sign of compassion amid hardship. In another striking case, a 400,000-year-old Homo heidelbergensis skull from Kabwe, Zambia revealed extensive tooth decay and gum disease. The individual suffered from massive cavities and abscesses, with the infection spreading into the jawbone, a slow, excruciating death. Despite a diet low in sugar, this early human succumbed to natural disease, a reminder that nature's arsenal extended beyond fang and claw. And around 1.7 million years ago, in East Africa, the remains of a woman known only as KN-1808 told yet another tragic tale. Her bones showed signs of hypervitaminosis, a rare and painful condition caused by an overdose of vitamin A. Researchers theorize she may have consumed the liver of a carnivore, an organ that stores the vitamin in dangerous concentrations. Her skeleton displayed abnormal bone growths and swelling, signs of intense internal suffering. These personal stories of affliction, disease, disability, accidental death remind us that violence was only one of many challenges our ancestors faced. Each set of remains is not merely a data point, but a person who lived, struggled, and died. Through their bones, we glimpse resilience, care, tragedy, and connection. By studying the most brutal chapters of our distant past, we learn not only how ancient people died, but how they lived. Their values, fears, relationships, and ingenuity rise from the grave with each discovery. And in their stories of both horror and hope, we see echoes of ourselves. Across tens of thousands of years, we remain linked by the unbroken thread of human experience. Even in prehistory's darkest shadows, those ancient voices whisper a truth still relevant today. We are part of a long, complex, and deeply human journey,